Good morning. The focus this week for markets shifts from the US to Europe. So we spent last week looking at a large number of US data points, particularly on the employment spectre, and Kevin and Matt provided a lot of detail on Friday in our review of markets as to how that data was influencing market performance, but also how it was feeding into how the Federal Reserve are likely to be thinking about their decision on September the 18th. Really, the non-farm payrolls, as they discussed, continues to really highlight ongoing growth in job creation, so a relatively positive backdrop in that regard, albeit slowing. When we look to this week then, turning to Europe, certainly the focus will be on the European Central Bank's decision on Thursday, and it's likely that they will reduce interest rates by a further 0.25%. Indeed, most of the data that we've seen from Europe over recent months since that meeting in July has indicated a further slowing in activity trends and does warrant action by the ECB. I think really key to that, however, will be how they position their forecasts and the discussion around their decision-making process and how far they go to signalling further interest rate reductions in Europe over the coming months. If we look at the US then, the focus there will probably certainly shift from employment to inflation with the CPI report on Wednesday. And that's probably likely just to continue that trend that we've been talking about over many months now of relatively benign inflation backdrop in the US, pretty much consistent in terms of those month-on-month movements of around 0.2%, with that longer-term inflation target that the Federal Reserve has of 2%, so unlikely to sway decision-making in any way. I think also it's just worth touching on, we have the second presidential debate this week as well, so politics certainly going to be in focus. Will be the first when we see Kamala Harris go head-to-head with Donald Trump, and that will give markets something to focus on in terms of policy and direction. But as I looked at the polls this morning, really there's a margin of error between both candidates, so certainly worth noting whether it brings any change to that. In Asia this week, I've probably focused in on Chinese data, and I do that because we get credit data for the month of August. And that follows, if you remember, the changes to policy that came through in July. We'll be looking to see if there is any subtle change in credit conditions into the broader economy. Certainly when we look at the data this morning from an inflation perspective, not a lot to write home about. Food inflation is the main key factor worth mentioning, but then the rest of the economy remains pretty moribund in somewhat of a deflationary period, if not outright deflation. And then when we look at that coming through into producer prices, again, a negative environment. So really the challenges for China still very evident. I'll leave it there today, but please do join the team through the course of the week on Morning Markets to be kept up to date on all of the aspects that are impacting asset markets.
This video is not a recommendation or personal financial advice. With investing, your capital is at risk. Investments can fluctuate in value and you may get back less than you invest.